This is Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland, and we are here Mondays with John Rothmann. We welcome him, as we do every week, to Facepalm America, and it has been quite a week. It's been a very difficult week. John Rothmann, as you know, is the host of Around the Political World with John Rothmann. He is an author, perhaps most notably, given the course of our conversation today, of Icon of Evil. He is a former talk show host at KGO in San Francisco, and he brings, again, his words to a listening and anxious audience every weekday on Around the Political World with John Rothmann. You can find that on any listening platform. John, welcome to Facepalm America. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be with you, Beowulf, always.
It has been a very difficult week. We find that the attacks on Israel continue. There are massive evacuations from Gaza. Perhaps a million people. President Biden is considering a trip to Israel, and it looks as if we are sending a second carrier group to the Middle East.
We did send. We've sent the Ford first, and now we've sent the Eisenhower.
Right. So, what are your thoughts? It's been a lot, and certainly we, as the United States of America, are in the midst of this. What are your thoughts as to what has gone on?
It's horrific. And those of you who had the opportunity to really pay attention to what happened in Israel, the absolute slaughter of men, women, children by the Hamas terrorists. This is not a battle between Israel and the Palestinians. It is a battle between Israel and Hamas. And perhaps by destroying Hamas, at least destroying it militarily, Israel will give Palestinians a chance to breathe. This is a disaster for many reasons. And let me talk about the geopolitical implications for just a moment. First of all, I'm watching very carefully what happens with Lebanon. Understand, it's not Lebanon, the country we're talking about. We're talking about Hezbollah, which has occupied southern Lebanon. Hezbollah, led by Nasrallah, has more than, listen carefully, 150,000 rockets. Mm-hmm. If they join this battle, what will happen is that as rockets are fired off, Israel has Iron Dome. Iron Dome can't handle 150,000 rockets coming in. It will be devastation for Tel Aviv, for northern Israel, Haifa, the whole area. And so we have moved our Gerald Ford and Dwight D. Eisenhower there in order to try to say to Nasrallah, if you hit, you're not only hitting Israel, we'll respond as well. The Israelis are very worried about it. I also want to point out to you that Israel faces another front, and that is Syria. Rockets have been fired from Syria. As you know, Syria is not a functioning country, similar to Lebanon. These are countries that don't really function. Yeah. And so the terrorists that operate out of Syria are firing rockets, and the Israelis will respond appropriately. That is not as dangerous as Nasrallah and Lebanon. The West Bank is a serious issue. As you know, Mahmoud Abbas issued a statement to Venezuelan media yesterday condemning Hamas and then stepped back from it. And there is a reason. Because Hamas, if there were free democratic elections in the West Bank, would win the election. Right. And Abbas, who I would remind you is 85 years old and has not had an election in years and serves up the sufferance of the West, we've propped him up as a counterbalance to Hamas. But the danger is that, and some people have suggested, well, the answer is a two-state solution. Let me point out that Israel at its narrowest is 9 miles wide prior to the Six-Day War. That if, in fact, the Palestinians had a state on the West Bank and Hamas ruled it, Israel would be in dire straits indeed. Thank God there is no Palestinian state on the West Bank as of today. Now, here's the kicker. This is going to be a devastating war, and the Israelis have made clear they will not compromise. And what happens when you have an unconditional war? Well, we saw it when the United States in World War II fought Germany and Japan. We would not accept anything less than unconditional surrender. And I want to point out what happened at the end of the war. Germany developed into a great democracy. led by Konrad Adenauer, the former mayor of Cologne, who had been anti-Nazi. And Japan, thanks in part to Emperor Hirohito, developed into a vibrant, vital democracy. And, by the way, Douglas MacArthur, who wrote the Constitution. The hope, I believe, is that out of the ashes of this conflagration will come a new Palestinian sense, a Palestinian movement that is willing to live side by side with Israel. May I point out, and I don't want to take all the time, Beowulf, and I know we have limited time, Israel withdrew from Gaza completely. It gave up all the settlements in Gaza. It withdrew all Israeli citizens in Gaza. It withdrew everything. And it was Arik Sharon, the former prime minister about whom we used to say he was like a bull who carried with him his own china shop. It was Arik Sharon who took the gamble. He believed that if the Palestinians would embrace the idea of peaceful coexistence, that Gaza could turn into the Singapore of the Middle East, and that indeed there would be peace. Instead, the Palestinian Authority was destroyed. By the way, the leaders of the Palestinian Authority were executed by Hamas immediately. Hamas seized Gaza, and chaos has ensued since. In order to have a genuine peace, well, you have to have somebody to negotiate with and somebody you trust. May I remind you of one last thing? When you read the Hamas Covenant, which I recommend everyone read, it's online, read Article 7. It quotes the Haditha, a commentary on the Quran. And these words are critical. These are the reasons Hamas strikes. If a Jew should hide behind a rock or a tree, let the rock or the tree cry out, "There is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him." This, my friends, is not a war against Israel. It is a war against Jews as well. And I would suggest it is really a war against civilization.
It's shocking and horrific. If you were to advise President Biden, what would you have him do, and how do we mitigate the humanitarian crisis that has been created by this situation?
Okay, first of all, the humanitarian crisis was created by Hamas, pure and simple. It's not Israel's fault. Israel's going to respond. If I were going to deal with Joe Biden, and I talk about it today in my podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothmann, that was the commercial, Beowulf, there is no question in my mind that Joe Biden is going to Israel. He's going to stand strong with Israel. As you know, I worked for Richard Nixon, and there are real parallels because 50 years ago, at the end of the Yom Kippur War, Richard Nixon went to Israel, and he said to the Israelis, "We will not allow you to be flushed down the toilet." Those were his words. And I would suggest to you, Joe Biden is going to Israel, standing firm and strong. I thought his speech the other night about American support for Israel was as good a speech, the best speech that he's ever given as president. And anybody who chooses, you can support Joe Biden or oppose Joe Biden. It's okay, whatever your political position. His standing firm with Israel, which is bipartisan. Most Democrats, most Republicans are firmly there. I was shocked, deeply disturbed by Donald Trump's comments, which were inexcusable, horrific, and if anything, there are many things which I think would disqualify him from being president of the United States again, but that certainly does it. Can you imagine? You know what he was mad about with Netanyahu? Because Netanyahu was the first foreign leader to pick up the phone and congratulate Joe Biden on winning the presidency. And of course, Donald Trump viewed that as a betrayal. As far as I'm concerned, we're very lucky in this circumstance to have a Joe Biden as president of the United States.
And speaking of the former president, we have had word this morning that a narrow gag order has been imposed in the January 6th case. Judge Tanya Chutkan said Trump's status as a candidate will not give him carte blanche to level a smear against those involved in the case. What is your response to that? Is this a long time in coming? Should it be expanded? Is this something that we may see with his other cases that are ongoing?
3 cheers for the judge. Exactly the right thing. You cannot have in an American legal system a defendant blasting the judge, theoretically even a jury, and all of the prosecutors involved. Calling the prosecutor deranged. I mean, give me a break. This should have been a much tougher gag order. It does not, and I want to emphasize this, it does not limit Donald Trump's ability to comment about the trial or things that he feels about. It is personal attacks on the judge, on prosecutors, on juries. That would be unacceptable. And I believe that this is another reason why, even Republicans who support Donald Trump for president or have supported him should realize this is a man who today has revealed himself to be completely unfit for the presidency of the United States.
Absolutely. It is just stunning to me that even stronger measures are not or have not yet taken place. And I hope that the many other judges, and there are many of them, will take similar action and indeed, as you allude to, stronger action. And while we're dealing with this crisis of the presidency, while we're dealing with this crisis in Israel, we have still no Speaker of the House of Representatives, and it seems as if Steve Scalise has withdrawn his candidacy, and that Jim Jordan of Ohio, who has made quite a pro-Trump spectacle of himself over the last several years, has received the nomination and is scouring votes at the moment. Do you think that he will fill the vacuum? And if so, how will he go about that?
There are too many Republicans opposed to Jim Jordan. They're saying they won't vote for him. I must say that I remember a day, and if I can be a little bit of a historian at the moment, when Sam Rayburn first became Speaker of the House in 1940, in September of 1940. Many people will be surprised to know he was elected unanimously, Democrats and Republicans alike, because the institution of the House was critical. The Republican leader, Joe Martin, said, "We are approaching a war. We have to be ready for this." It was the middle of a political campaign, by the way. Wilkie and Roosevelt were battling it out. And yet the House of Representatives came together to elect a speaker on a unanimous basis. The disunity in the House of Representatives is horrific. And may I say, for people around the world who respect American democracy, the spectacle of the House of Representatives, the People's House, being unable to come to a conclusion on a speaker is shameful. This is a matter of national security. I don't think Jordan will be speaker. If he were, I think it would be a disaster, because those people who know Jim Jordan and his antics understand that. And I think then the question will be what the House will do to bring itself together and get a speaker that can really run the House and be responsive to the members. You know, Sam Rayburn was a magnificent speaker because he made friendships across the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, was universally respected. And at a time of crisis, and I'm not just talking about the Middle East or Ukraine, I'm also talking about the domestic crises. You need a Speaker of the House of Representatives who can wield the gavel effectively, powerfully, and with a confidence of honesty and integrity from both sides of the aisle.
I'm wondering, because we are facing a countdown here. When they renewed the continuing resolution, if I'm understanding things correctly, that kept the government from shutting down, 45 days are going to elapse from that time until it needs to be done again or some other action needs to be taken. And the House is not in a position to do that. So they are under the gun, are they not?
They are. The House is, but particularly the Republicans. And let me point out, the Democrats have offered to work with the Republicans. Get us a candidate for speaker. We can all work this out. But the Republicans seem very self-destructive. You know, you've known me a long time, Beowulf, and that's the reason why you've allowed me to participate with you in your program. I was once a Republican. I was called a scholar of modern republicanism by Richard Norton Smith. I have written a book about Harold Stassen, who is one of the leaders of the Republican Party. I mean, I'm not somebody who is not unfamiliar. This is not the Republican Party that I grew up with. This is not the Republican Party that knew how to lead a nation and bring a nation together. Certainly there are Republican leaders, whether you go back in time and you think about a Joe Martin or a Charlie Halleck or a Joe Martin or a Bob Michael, and I'm going to skip all the others, who were responsible and who loved their country and who acted in the best interests of the country. I must tell you, the Republican Party is doing itself tremendous damage in this struggle, because they have to prove that they are not only a responsible party, but a party that can govern. And what they need is a moderate voice within the party who can build consensus. And you know the tragedy? They don't have it.
Do you think they even want to lead at this point? It seems like they are more interested in just stopping the process, that they would prefer to see the government shut down.